I need to be in the right physiological and emotional state before I make my decision. So therefore, the most important thing I can teach people is a timeout. And the idea that if I'm not in the right physiological state, if I'm not in the right emotional state, I call a timeout.
Hi, welcome to the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Channel. I'm your host, Tarun Stevenson, and we are all about helping you lead, communicate, and grow to your full potential. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite podcasting app, don't forget to subscribe and follow so that you can stay up to date with all our latest episodes. All right, here's the latest episode. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, Tarun Stevenson here, and I'm here with Massy. It's great to have him on this show. He is a strategist and author and coach. And today we're going to be talking about decision making and how you can become a co-author in your own destiny. Welcome to the show, Carl.
Thank you very much. And I just got a warning to people. I'm in Bali at the moment. There may be a torrential downpour happening and a lot of noise at some point. So
all right, good. So the rumblings we know are not your stomach, it's the thunder outside. All right, awesome. Well, it's great to have you, Carl. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? You've had a fascinating lead up to where you are now. You told me a little bit about it before we got on the show.
Yep.
So why don't you, for the listeners, give us a bit of background?
So I can do the chronological thing. So 14 years in the Army, 5 years consulting to mega events around the world. Bali, the last 13 and a half years, coaching, writing books, running seminars and that sort of stuff. But I guess for me, my origin story is, I won't go through the bad breakup that caused me to decide I wanted to get on the other side of the planet from this person. And it was while I was on the other side of the planet, I was in the military at the time and I'd taken a year's leave without pay. So I was about 9 years into the military, a captain in the Australian Army. And I took myself overseas, and one of the things I realized once I separated myself from the known and familiar, whether that was the institution I worked for, the military at that time, my family, once I moved overseas, it sort of took a weight off my shoulders and allowed me to fully understand who I was, what I believed in, and that sort of stuff, as opposed to imprinting by family and institution. Mm-hmm. And it was in that time that I started to realize the impact of beliefs. And beliefs that have, societal beliefs, institutional belief, familial beliefs, and that sort of thing. So I came back from that year experience, and most people didn't expect me to come back and return to the Army, but I came back with a mission to finish a degree. I'd busted my knee up playing rugby in the military, but I sort of did a total job on my knee in Lake Louise, skiing in Canada. And I had some debts to pay off. So I decided to come back. And while I came back, there was a part of me that felt like, I was being uncourageous, not stepping out into the world and coming back to the security blanket of the Army. So there was, a bit of an inner war going on, and sort of I wasn't that appreciative of the person that I was seeing reflected back to me in the mirror. So, a lot of times when that happens, we distract ourselves, numb ourselves out, and, I was hitting the bottle pretty hard. And in the military, this is, back in the sort of late 90s, conducive place in the officers' mess for, getting heavily on the booze. I remember having this bender of a weekend, and I sort of woke up in the middle of the night. It's about, 2 a.m. in the morning. And this is back in 1999. I've put the television on, which is something I wouldn't normally do. And there's this infomercial going. And there's this big 6'7" guy with a face full of teeth, Tony Robbins, and he was firing from the hip, selling his 30-day program. So, back in the day, I've jumped on the phone to order his program, rang it up, spoke to a real person on the other end, got my credit card out, read the numbers off, and I got his 30-day program, and I did that Easter 1999. And that for me was a huge course correction. Completely changed my life. I sort of went vegetarian, got into yoga and stopped getting drunk. And, it took a while for my Army buddies to accept me, that I hadn't just lost the plot or whatever. As you can imagine, a bunch of Army mates I'd go along to a barbecue and I'd have some soda waters or some light beers. I'd have some eggplant and zucchini to grill up on the barbecue.
Mhm.
My mates would tell me to piss off and come back with 5 kilograms of steak and a case of beers. So I had to weather that out for about 3 months. But, that was the turning point in my life. And the other thing I did was I started realizing that I wanted to get a real education. And that real education was I started reading. And, since that time, sort of Easter 1999, I've read hundreds and hundreds of books, whether it's, all different forms and formats of psychology, whether it's neuroscience,
Mm.
epigenetics, a lot of stuff in the health space, and, pretty broad spectrum. So that's, really given me, this knowledge base. And then from there, the hero's journey, I wanted to teach other people what I was drawing from
Mm.
these as I put the pieces together. So I came up with a plan to write, 5 books in 10 years. So that was the goal. I wanted to write about happiness first, then it was health, then it was success. And then I sort of ended up writing a book on the mind, sort of the successful mind, the integration and relationship between conscious and subconscious.
Mm.
And then the last book was on decision making as a coach, and I've been coaching now for about 13 plus years. I just see so many poor decisions leading to where people end up.
Yeah.
That could have, if we reverse engineered it, if there was a better decision making process for someone to go, there'd be a different outcome. So that's it in a nutshell. And
Mm.
the rain has started. Is that, sort of.
No, I can't hear it, so it's working
Perfect.
out okay, I think.
Perfect.
Well, thank you for sharing that story because it's a fascinating story. I want to we're going to get into your latest book, Decision Making Mastery. Before I do, I just want to pick apart some of your story there. You said that after you busted your knee on Lake Louise, that you weren't liking what you saw of yourself. And I think the words you used were you didn't feel like you were being courageous.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
sounds like, I guess, you're in the military. You're obviously a physically fit person. You're doing things
Yep.
like skiing, you're playing rugby, you're doing all
Yep.
the things that externally would say to everybody you're a courageous person.
Mm,
What
mm,
was it about
mm.
what you saw that said, no, that's not courage? There's
Yeah.
something missing.
And awesome question, because the awesomeness of that was when I came back to the military, I actually had a knee reconstruction. I had a phenomenal surgeon through the military, amazing rehabilitation. And physically, I actually became faster, stronger than before I had the accident. So it
Mm,
really wasn't any of this physical thing. It was a deep psychological thing, looking in my heart, thinking I didn't have the courage to step away from the army, because at some point I realized I wasn't necessarily into the security thing. I loved people and I
mm,
love working with people. So, I could do the security thing, but that wasn't my jam. My jam was actually working, leading people,
mm,
helping people to do things that they didn't necessarily want to do, and massage that process. So it was feeling that I didn't have the courage to actually continue on after that year's leave without pay
mm,
and challenge myself out in the big wide world without the security and safety blanket of the military. Because
mm,
I felt like, I went from a very hierarchical family unit
mm,
to another hierarchical unit in the military. And I felt like I was just doing the same thing.
mm,
Part of me wanted to explore beyond that.
mm,
And, then there's the part I'm feeling don't have the courage to step out on my own. So I had this sort of internal battle going on in that
mm.
sense. So that was the psychological piece of it. I didn't feel I had the courage to step out on my own to do my own thing.
Mm. That's great. So you talk a lot about the security of, or the, I guess, the backup of the army, and how that, so you were able to take a year off because you knew you could go back to the army. And part of my
Absolutely.
story is I've always found that I don't find my next step until I've cut off the security of my previous step. And that's true for a lot of people. Talk to us about the process of when you first got to that place where you made the break. You've watched this
Mm.
Tony Robbins uh,
Yep.
infomercial, you've bought the course. What were the
Yep.
steps that you took to actually break that umbilical cord from the army? And then how did you move into the next phase of your life?
Yeah, cool. Um, I call myself a strategist, 14 years in the army and then 5 years at high level with mega events, Olympic Games and that sort of stuff. So even though I make a choice to do something, I strategically map it out. I say, okay, I need to finish this degree. I need to save up some money. So I had this plan to, and obviously in Australia, we've got this thing called long service leave. So I built that up. So I put another buffer in. I'm going to finish up, and I was involved with the Sydney Olympics and the security for that, and a beautiful project on that. But I had like 8 months of pay from long service leave, another couple of months of annual leave. So I had about 11 months of paid vacation before I was actually leaving the military, which gave me that buffer zone. And I sort of took a half step outside of that, because what I did is I stepped back into security. So I stepped into working as a consultant, talking about security at Olympic Games. So I was still doing what I did in the military. I took all those skills and that sort of stuff. Because I went along and saw Tony Robbins on stage, and I said, I want to be doing that coaching thing. Not the same as him. I'm 5'4", he's 6'7", so there's a bit of a different thing there. But I said, that's what I want to do. So I transitioned into this consulting space, but part of that again was I wanted to have the travel experience, and I wanted to cash up to give myself another buffer again when I make this final transition.
Yeah.
So, I make transitions, but I am about how can I set it up so it can be more easeful and graceful.
Great.
Now, as you know, we come up with our best plans, and, they're our best plans. Life has different ideas. So,
Yeah.
I had my big financial buffer, then global financial crisis comes along after I just invested a whole lot of that. And, it wiped out a whole chunk of that. So my big stepping stone, become a lot more of a smaller stepping stone. And what I found is sometimes we need to be on the edge a little bit to kick our own ass to like get ourselves in the game. Because if we got too big a buffer, then you come to Bali, low cost of living. I could have sat around for 5 years doing nothing.
Yeah.
And, that dream sort of filters out. So life is like, oh, I can see you getting too lazy, sitting on your butt there, sipping coconuts under trees or whatever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you like little cash buffer. I'm just going to throw that away. And now I'm going to put you back in the game. So I had that tumultuous experience of, oh shit, I actually need to, do something. I've worked for the man for 20 years. And now I actually need to do something. And I have a lot of clients, and I love working with people transitioning. And I say, the transition from working corporate to by yourself, there's a gap. And the gap is the size of the freaking Grand Canyon. Like, make no mistakes. Like, working for yourself, there's a lot of, benefits in that, but it's in your face. You don't have the resources, the support network. So that was the big thing for me, was the learning, how to do things on my own. And I just, got put through the ringer because I tried to figure it all out myself, which is pretty daft in hindsight.
Okay, so let's walk through some of the lessons that you gleaned from that experience and how you managed to walk yourself out of it and set yourself up in a place where you're making great decisions and being, if you like, your words, the co-creator of your destiny.
Yeah, yeah. So, a lot of that, and, I teach sort of business coaching and different types of coaching, but when I talk about success in that business context is you need to be good at what you're doing. In my case, so good at coaching. Then you need to learn the business skills. So there's certain skills I need to skill up on. But then, as you know, there's that mindset piece, and that was the piece that needed the greatest amount of work. And I remember, and, again, I made the decision, the poor decision, not to get help as I transitioned that. no, I can figure this thing out myself, which is just dumbass. So, I come up with my plan and I've got my whiteboard there and I'm coming up with my goals and I'm going for big, hairy, audacious goals. And I've like written that out. And as I'm getting closer to the deadline and I'm nowhere near that goal, I'm so far off, I start stressing out. I break out in this rash on my hand, like I'm so stressed. I'm like, Jesus. And then I'm like, I have the realization that I wrote those freaking numbers, those zeros, and I could rub out a couple of zeros and suddenly.
Yeah.
So one of them was the idea that we, overestimate what we can do in the short term and underestimate what we can do in the long term.
Yeah. Good.
So that was probably one of my biggest lessons. I remember one of my first coaching clients, and she had an online business to do with midwifery. And I was doing personal training with her because I've done personal training as well. And she told me it takes about 5 to 7 years to, hit the straps in your business. And I'm like, no, I went and did a freaking course with Brendan Bouchard over in the States. And, he went from zero to this in this period of time. So I reckon I've got the sort of the model. I can do it in 2 years. Bullshit. So 5 to 7 years later, I'm like, oh, okay, now, this is about the time frame. So, lots of lessons along the way. And I guess the thing that allows us to move through that and make it to the other end is really working on our mindset. And I'm a huge fan of, daily rituals and morning rituals. And I've been doing the same morning rituals for 10 plus years. And for me, they're the bedrock that I build everything on. They don't get a day off. They're 365 days or 366 in a leap year.
So can you give us an example of some of that morning ritual that you go through, and what are some of the affirmations or the self-talk that you use to keep yourself motivated?
Yeah, fantastic. And one of the things studying neuroscience and studying sort of habit forming as well is realizing if we need to use willpower in this sort of frontal lobe, frontal cortex of our brain, it actually consumes more energy. We want to make something a habit because then it's down sort of, base of our brain, higher density of neurons. So it's actually consuming less energy. So what I do with waking up in the morning is I string as many things, high return on investment activities to that as possible. And I make those a habit.
Great.
So I sit up in bed, I twist and turn, I sort of lean forward, sort of straighten my spine, and I say a couple of mantras as I'm there. I get up, I grab a glass of water with some apple cider vinegar, and I drink that, hydrating, and also the alkaline nature of that apple cider vinegar. Might sit here and sort of look out and sort of say good morning to the beautiful day. So I'm starting to set the intention of gratitude and appreciation. Do my bathroom thing, come back out, I do energization exercises, and they're like loosely based. There's a guy in the yoga space, and I've been doing yoga for 20 plus years, called Paramahansa Yogananda, who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. So most yogis have heard the book. And he had these energization exercises. So I've sort of taken those and added to them, and they're about, moving my spine, get energy flowing through my body. I have mantras that I say as I'm doing that. And that's preparing myself. Then I go from there. And again, I'm just stringing all these things together, no break in it. I walk into my office, I've got a chin-up bar. I do 8 chin-ups every morning. And I do 8 chin-ups because they're good for our physiology, but they're also good psychologically because there's not too many times I go to that chin-up bar and I think, awesome, I've got to do chin-ups this morning. I'm like, here's the way to psychologically condition yourself to be able to do things that you don't feel like doing, because that's going to support me in every element of my life. So I do those every day without fail. And then I like sit down on a cushion like I'm sitting down now and I meditate. And I've been meditating every day, for the last 10 plus years. Do that meditation, and then I'll normally get up and I'll do some physical training, and then I'll come back and I'll plan my day. And what I say is everything is a lead up to me planning my day. Because I want to know, and this is the decision, what are the priorities for the day in order for me to have a successful day. And if I have a successful day, followed by a successful day, followed by a successful day, I've got a successful life. So all of that is making sure I'm in the right physiological, psychological, emotional, mental state to be my most creative genius self, to look at the big picture and put all the pieces together.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the keys for me to success is when you map out your day, what state are you in when you map it out?
Mm.
And don't just wing it, leave it to chance. It's like, what can I do, systematically to actually, level myself up so I'm in the peak state for that experience.
Great. So how long does that morning routine take from the time that you get up to, say, the time you're sitting down to plan your day? How long are you giving yourself for that routine?
And here's the thing with routines is to make sure, in military would say flexibility is a principle of
Mm.
warfare. That routine needs to be flexible enough so it can expand and contract based on life happening around you,
Hmm.
which means I can travel, I might be doing a talk or seminar somewhere and I can travel and I just sort of compress that down to like a 15-minute show.
Yeah.
When I'm back home, it expands out to a 2-hour show.
Right.
And I need to do more work on myself than my clients so that I can show up leveled up for my clients. Because a lot of
Great.
what I want to do is in that peak emotional state, those elevated emotional states, so I
Mm.
can hold space for that client. So yeah, some mornings it can be 2 hours, but for me, that's pure investment.
Great. Great. So you plan out your day, and when you're planning out your day, are we talking about a task list, a to-do list, or are we talking a lot more strategic and a lot more uh,
That one.
directive? So talk to that, because what's the difference? I think a
Because
lot of people would say they plan out their day, but it's just a to-do list. So how do you
yeah, so
approach your day to make it productive and make it work for you?
yeah, and I've listened to lots of different teachers and teachings on how that might map out. And I do like Brendan Bouchard, like he is very strategic in how he does things. So I sort of map it out and I have three goals. So I write down at the top of the page just a little affirmation. And it might be something just, I tap into the day and I feel this source energy moving through me to bring out my best. So I'm just setting intentions along the way.
Mm.
I have my three goals for the day, and they're my three priorities. In some speak, it might be most important tasks. Then I have my sessions that I need to do. So they're booked in, this conversation with you. I've got a coaching session this afternoon. They're immovable, they're essential. And then as I look at what I've got in those sessions, I revisit my priorities to see, based on these things that I've locked in, have I
Mm.
actually got time to do these three things? And
Yeah.
I might go, no, I actually don't have time. I've only got time for two. Okay, if I only got time for two, which are the two most important? So I do that process and then I come down to connect. Who do I need to connect with today? Because what tends to happen is once we bang our emails open, we're sort of inundated with other people's
Yeah.
priorities.
Yeah.
I want to know who I need to reach out for my priorities. So I have that written there. So, when this stream of emails comes in, that tide, I'm actually there with a little bit of a plan about what I need to move forward.
Sure.
And one of the things I want to add, which is important, was I used to write down sort of 6 or 7 things that I'd aim to get done in the day. And
Yeah.
I'd never get 7 done. So I'd get to the end of the day and I'd feel like a bit of a failure because I hadn't done the things I'd set, but I set that up myself. So then I said, I'm never going to have more than 3 key tasks. If I've got extra ones, they might be down the bottom of my page. And if I get these 3 done, then I can revisit those.
Right.
So that's the key for me. For me, my teaching is, there's no such thing as time management. It's about priority management. It's about really understanding what's my goal, what am I aiming for, and what are the things that are going to take me towards that.
Yeah.
And everything else is a distraction. Like if I have that plan, I'm 80% steering in that direction.
So how are you assessing your priorities for the day? Because you obviously got competing priorities. You've got competing goals and
Yep.
productivity that you need to
Yep.
stay on top of. And so what's the process that you're going through to align your priorities so that they're pulling in the same direction?
So and this is Monday morning. So every Monday morning, I do a 2-hour beach walk and I finish up and I go to a cafe and I have a meeting with Massy Inc. And I sit down in that meeting with self and I look at what I've got for the week. I even look at relationships. I look at every element of my life and I check in every Monday to make sure that's right. Then I get to taking that information, I put it into my weekly schedule. Then I come to my day and I look at what's my weekly schedule. Because my experience with my clients has been there's sometimes if we don't check in enough, we're 3 months down the track and we realize, what am I doing this thing for? I'm not actually enjoying it. I don't want to have that happen. So I'm strategic about every week I need to check in. Even though I had a priority last week, is it still my priority? Is it still something I really want to be doing? Because there might have been something through between then and now which says, it's not really a priority. And I have this, one of the yogic teachings is about, non-attachment. I'm not attached to having done something, even if I've spent 6 months on it. If I get to the stage and it's no longer serving me, I'm just packing it up and, putting it in the recycle bin. So go, what's the now priority?
Great.
And I'd sort of bring then my life plasma into, okay, let's work on that thing. And let's let go of that thing. No longer serves.
Yeah. So what you're really saying is that your Mondays you carve out as it's you time, it's self-reflection time.
Absolutely.
And you don't let that get crowded out by anyone else or anything else, because that's where the rest of your week really comes from. And you're able to assess where you're at personally, emotionally, relationally, business-wise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is this idea of self-leadership. It's like, I need to be, really, really protective of that time. So I might do my beach walk, meet one of my best buddies who says, you want to catch up for a coffee? And I'm like, I got a meeting on and I can't miss this meeting. So I can see you after that meeting, but I'm busy 9 till 10:30. You can't touch me.
Yeah.
So this is, sacrifice where I think is part of this self-leadership thing where we work out, I need to lead myself first and I need to be really clear about which moving pieces have the biggest return on investment. And I don't sort of, play around with those things. Because some people might get caught up on, but you're so rigid, like having this thing. But I would say it's my rigidity of that. It's me having these, pillar pieces in that allow so much more flexibility because I'm so much more efficient.
Great. That's so good. I love that you call it a meeting with Massy Inc. because it really makes it a priority in your own head and helps you to say no to other people, which is so good. So what are some of the other immovable blocks in your week, your month that you just don't negotiate on that help you to stay on track and stay in the right flow?
I mean, when we were in the military, and I love this idea, we used to have like a Wednesday afternoon sport. So, it's like school, you finish at like 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, and Wednesday afternoon was always sport because they realized the importance of those bonding experience, that physical activity experience, and all that sort of thing. So rather than it being a waste of time, recognizing that that break from work is actually beneficial for the big picture work.
Sure.
So I've integrated that in, and I on a Wednesday sort of finish at 12:31, and I dedicate that to Massy afternoon, and I just whatever I want to do in that afternoon, I carve out a few hours, 3-4 hours for myself. I've been in a relationship. We just had our anniversary yesterday, 13 years.
Congratulations.
And, thanks, buddy. And my partner just realizes that I need this me time. So part of me being the best me in that relationship, I need to work on me.
Great.
So, I live in Bali. I go off and I get a massage. I go for a lunch by myself. I just get our book out. It's a lot of times it might be fiction, sometimes non-fiction, but that's one of the pieces that I've decided is immovable. And that's only been in the last 1 to 2 years. Right. Talking relationship, Sunday's quality time with my partner. So I don't book out any work against that unless it's absolutely urgent, unless it's cleared with my partner, unless I compensate. I say, okay, I'll take out this chunk on a Sunday, but we'll make it up by putting this piece in. I'll shuffle my day around there. So I'm always like up here,
Mm, mm,
sort of seeing how these pieces fit together. And again, that's, you know, one of my favorite things and one of my favorite teachings is about, decisions, about consciousness, about, how can I put myself in the right state to be making decisions? Because when I make decisions from a place of fear, I go tunnel visions, I'm hyper fixated, I've dropped down to my midbrain, I don't have perspective.
mm.
So what can I do to put myself into the right state of mind, right state of being, right physiology to actually make my best decisions? And again, we can talk on that decision-making process.
Mm. Well, okay. Well, that's probably a good segue to let's get into that, because I think this is really helpful, just helping to understand these immovable blocks. And block scheduling is something that I've been using for a couple of years now and found it really beneficial for a busy week, not to get yourself overcrowded, but like you, scheduling in time for important uh, relationships, scheduling in time for yourself. But I've really
Mm,
taken away from this conversation that I need to schedule in more time for reflection on my priorities, because that's probably something I don't do. I sit down and make a to-do list, but I don't have
mm,
a priority for the week. And so I'm
yeah,
more putting out spot fires every time it comes through. And so that's really helpful. I really like that. So
yeah.
let's talk about decision making and how that impacts the way we move forward, or as you would say, being a co-creator in your destiny. Why is it
Mm.
important to know how to make decisions well?
Yeah. So, again, I just, highlight that idea. We want to be co-creators, and the choices we make have a huge impact on determining our destiny. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate within myself and with my clients. So I wrote the book Decision Making Mastery over the course of 2020. And I usually write a book over a year, then sort of, market it, plug it, talk about it, do things on it the next year, and then I might start writing another book. So that's the process. And the most simple thing that came out of this 1 year of being in the deep dive on decision making was that I think the most important thing out of this whole book is the idea I need to be in the right physiological and emotional state before I make my decision.
Mm,
So, therefore, the most important thing I can teach people is a timeout.
great.
And, the idea that if I'm not in the right physiological state, if I'm not in the right emotional state, I call a timeout. I don't get pushed into making those decisions,
Mm,
particularly the important ones. The ones that I'm trying to decide which cafe to go to. Is it Korean or Japanese? Like,
mm,
it doesn't really matter, not end of the world. But the ones that have got high consequences, I need to am I in the right physical state? Am I well rested? Am I hydrated? Do I have the fuel? Am I hungry? And I might sort of go, okay, I need a 5-minute timeout.
mm,
I need to drink a glass of water. I need to have a little snack, munch on an apple. I need to step outside, look at some greenery. I need to center myself, ground myself, come back in. Because something I've talked about just recently, I was doing a podcast on it, was this idea of intellectual intelligence versus intuitive intelligence.
great.
So part of connecting to intuitive intelligence too is like really grounding so that I can be aware of what's my body telling me. What sensations are coming up, what emotions are coming up, where am I feeling things in my body, which might be, feedback from my subconscious mind. So physically, I want to put myself in that right state, and then psychologically, emotionally, mentally, I want to be okay. Am I in the right emotional state to have this conversation at the level I need to have it because of the consequences associated with this decision?
Great.
So an example, even in the workplace, might be boss comes along and says, I need your decision on this. And you're like, whoa, you just do a quick check-in. Hey, boss, time out. I can give you a response to that, but it's going to be a 60, 70%.
Mm,
Or you can give me 15 minutes and I'll freshen up and I'll come back and I'll give you 90% plus.
mm,
Over to you, boss. What is it? And, A good boss would say, yeah, okay, 15 minutes isn't going to make a difference in the overall scheme of things in most cases, unless it's a life or death situation. Most people don't work and operate in those environments. Step out, freshen up. Okay, now I've relaxed. I can actually get some more blood flow to prefrontal cortex of my brain. That allows me to have a broader perspective. Now I can see the broader perspective. I can tap into more creativity. I'm more likely to use the lens of curiosity as opposed to the lens of judgment. When we're tired, we judge things. When we're more relaxed, open, we're more curious about things, so we can see how those pieces fit together. So I guess that's the most important thing I took out of this 1 year of looking at decision making. Are you in the right physical and mental state to make the decision you need to make? Full stop. If you're not, time out.
So good. So good. I love it. So you've gotten yourself physically and emotionally and mentally ready for the decision. How do you avoid people pushing you into a decision or making the importance of the decision from their perspective your priority? I don't know if I articulated
Yeah,
that.
no, that's
you know what I'm
that's
saying? It's
cool.
like other people's
Yeah.
priorities become your urgencies and they don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be. So how do we avoid that process?
So this might be the part of
Sorry, you just dropped out there, Carl. I lost your voice.
that it's okay to call a timeout
Yeah.
if in the relationship, there's a conversation that needs to happen. So we might need to, in that case again, and I'll just go over it again because I saw we had a bit of a distraction there.
Yeah,
with
maybe
the
just start from
feed.
the beginning because we dropped out for probably about 30 seconds. So
Okay.
how to avoid other people's priorities becoming our urgency?
Perfect. So it might be there's a time where we need to have conversations with people to condition them to what the boundaries are to get these results. So there might be times where you need to try it a few times or, get buyership or, ownership of that process with the other people in the team. The example I was using was, say, with my partner, I would say to her, hey, the same thing. Look, if you give me a little bit more time to freshen up, you're going to get a better response in this. And if they get to experience that and they go, oh, yeah, it makes sense. So again, it might be something that might take a little bit of time to do. It might be, talking to the team around you and say, hey, I've got this thing I want to experiment with. I've been working with this coach, or I listened to this guy yap on the other day. And he was saying it's so important to call a timeout if you've got a good decision or an important decision with high consequences. You need to make sure you're in the right state, because if you're in a stress state, if you're in a fearful state or whatever, you don't have access to the frontal cortex of your brain. You don't have access to creativity. So you're going to end up with a subpar. You're probably going to end up with a decision based on the past when the past may not be the best decision in this moment.
Great.
In this moment, this is, leads on to a topic we talked about before this conversation. Was a lot of times we use the formula of knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. I used to teach the same thing. If we have the knowledge, so I build up these skills, I have the experience and I've got wisdom. But if I'm in a stressed state, I'm just going to draw on my wisdom from the past, which may not be the right fit for this situation. What I need to do is that's potential wisdom. I need to bring consciousness, broad perspective, curiosity to this situation that's in front of me. I need to be able to cherry pick the pieces from my past, put them together and say, okay, for this situation, this is the best outcome. This is the best solution. This is the best decision. So again, I think if we're not in this high state of consciousness, so that's what I say is wisdom plus consciousness. And consciousness is this awareness of all the pieces, awareness of our past experience, awareness of our past knowledge, and bringing that level of awareness, that level of consciousness collected with that wisdom into this new situation.
Mm.
And an example I might draw on is, so we did the Sydney Olympic Games. So myself and the team that I work with did security for that. Then we went to Salt Lake City. It was post September 11, so heightened security measures. So we had to modify how we did our security for that. Then we go to Athens, and Athens is a very different situation, circumstance. So if we try to put the same template onto Athens that we used Sydney or Salt Lake City, it would have failed. So we need to have, okay, this is the general context, but curiosity, conscious awareness in this situation. How can I take this model and apply it to this particular thing? So again, that's why I think sometimes people try to smash in, what they used in the past to a current situation.
Yeah.
So the more that we can be fully present, the more we can be in an elevated emotional state, high vibe physical state, the more we're going to be able to see, okay, this is how this thing best fits together. And then be able to make the best decision based on that, helicopter view versus the in the weeds view.
So how do you, okay, let's just say we're in a good physical, emotional state. You have a good conscious view of the situation, but you're working with somebody that perhaps doesn't operate like that. And they are just adamant, no, you have to get it done now and I need your decision now. How do you navigate the other people that don't operate in such a well-aware state of mind and state
Yeah.
of
So it can be a work in progress, and it might be, this idea. And I remember, having my boss in Athens who said to us, look, if we come in and we're working with the Greek police then, and they were at a very different level of sophistication than say the police in Australia. And he said, look, if they make a 10% improvement on how they've done business in the past, that's a glowing success. So sometimes we measure it against what we think they need to be rather than incremental improvement. So it might be in that team context. We start little by little introducing that boundary and pushing it a little bit. It might be, just give us 2 minutes. I'm just going to duck outside, go to the bathroom and grab a drink of water. And that might be the first piece. So you sort of wedge, no one's going to stop you going to the toilet. So that might be the first wedge. And then you start growing it by there. And you start I like the idea of telling people, look, let's just experiment. This isn't, I'm not telling you it must be done like this and this is the A way to do it. Here's an idea. Someone I'd listened to, it made sense to me at the time. I would like to see if it actually makes a difference. So if everyone's okay or open to it, could we try this little thing out? Because someone says, it's only going to be for the next 7 days. That person who might be obstructional goes, oh, it's only 7 days. I can humour him for, this period of time. So that might be an entryway to get that there.
Yeah.
The other way is do some formal training.
Yeah, good.
Go to the boss and say, hey, this is a great idea. I've just, become aware of this concept. How could we introduce it into the workplace?
Great. That's so good. I mean, maybe I'm off the track a little bit, but I think I'm gelling with you there. But one of the ways that I have dealt with people who perhaps push their urgency onto me is I learned this when I was in the education space, and I had a role where a lot of different teachers would require information from me, and everybody had a deadline that was yesterday. And I very quickly realized that everyone's urgency seems more urgent to them than it is to everybody else. And so just a simple little thing that I used to do was, what's the latest possible date and time that I can get back to you on this? And they would say, as soon as possible. Okay, yes, but give me a date. And then they'd go away and think about it, and they'd come back and say, not for 4 weeks. I'm like, great, I can work with 4 weeks. And very quickly you'd find out that there was way more lead in time than they were making out. And so you forced them to slow themselves down, and it also took the pressure off yourself to work through it at the pace that was required for your priorities. So I love that. That's such a great reminder. So once you've taken control of that conscious intentional way of working that doesn't get pushed into decision making, and you're not working under stress or duress. What's some of the next steps that you could take as a decision maker to get the outcomes that you need?
One of the things for me is obviously to make I say obviously, that doesn't necessarily imply the obviousness of it.
Yeah.
The quality of the pieces of information you're making decisions on. So in the military, it'd be the quality of the intelligence, and there would be different level of, quality of intelligence. This has been verified by 5 sources. This has been verified by 1 source. So again, I think this is one of the key pieces to making good decisions is the quality of the moving pieces. If anything's an assumption, it needs to be turned into a fact or as close to a fact as possible. So too many times we go into a decision-making process with a whole bunch of assumptions, and that might be in a relationship, an intimate relationship, that might be in a friendship, that might be in the workplace. All of those, we might be making assumptions, and we base a decision on an assumption. But as soon as we're using non-facts assumptions for our decision making, it's getting a little bit wobbly. So one of the keys is to turn assumptions as close to possible into facts. That may require us having a conversation, and a tough conversation with someone. Hey, I've got this impression that you think this thing is going to be like this, or your interpretation of it is this. Can you just confirm or validate that for me? Like, am I just way off course, or, am I somewhat close to it? So that for me again, and I was writing this over 2020, and again, I was telling you early on, I observed decision-making process over 2020, and it was, pretty appalling, some of the decision-making. And the idea that, one of the key things for us is discernment of the information. So we need to discern who's giving us the information, and then we need to discern the validity of it. Part of, and I talk about intellectual intelligence versus intuitive intelligence. I think we've gone so skew-if in intellectual intelligence and so down in intuitive intelligence that we're not good at intuiting whether someone's talking BS or if they're talking something that actually makes logical sense. So again, part of this decision-making process is gathering the facts, and part of that is intuiting, does this make sense? Is self-evident, or am I just, regurgitating some vomit someone puked up in my general direction? So again, that's our, we need to be stable, and we need to challenge this. And part of, spin that around to this self-leadership, we need to trust the inner guru. And I think part of 2020 is challenging us to let go of our attachment to false gurus and idols and all of that, and come back in, tap back in, and what am I being told? What's my heart telling me? What's my gut telling me? And tap back into these sensory things, because again, I think we've got too logical, we've got too technological, and we're sort of doing too much of this stuff here. So, we need to get back into that.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying, where we've elevated intellectual intelligence to a point where it diminishes our intuition, and we need to get back in touch with our intuition. It seems to me that there's a lot of conversation out in the public sphere that has less to do with fact and more to do with feeling. And intuition would say, no, this is wrong. What they're saying just doesn't make sense. But as long as it's got enough critical mass behind it, as long as it's got a loud enough voice behind it, it's accepted as fact, even if it flies in the face of common sense. And so it's almost like you're talking about a dichotomy here, where your intuition is required to decipher what is being called fact, but then sometimes the facts themselves have to be challenged against reality, if you like. And talk to me about that process of really what used to be called fiction is now being called fact, and to challenge it is folly, not to alliterate too much.
Yeah.
That, it seems like intuition and fact don't really play any
Yeah.
part in what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on
Don't,
that or
yeah,
opinions on that?
don't get me started on that. So one of the things for me, and this might lean back to the yogic teaching. So
Mm,
as well as doing yoga for 20 years, I was a co-owner in a yoga center for about 5 years. So it's a big part of my understanding. Like, I draw on all these different teachings. I mean, these yogis were using practices and principles over thousands of years. So they've really got to refine and define. And what they realize, and they talk about these energy centers, these chakras, and now neuroscientists like, Dr. Joe Dispenza are starting to go, yeah, actually there are these, central energy vortexes through the body, which we can measure with this equipment. But the yogis would say, like, the lower three energy centers are about survival, emotional states. And once we get sort of to the fourth, which is our heart and above, then we're getting into elevated emotional states. And that's using Joe Dispenza terminology. So I can't intuit when I'm in fear, because when I'm in fear, I'm only in survival. When I'm in survival, I can't see the big picture. When I'm in survival, I'm hyper fixated on the thing that's in front of me to remove that pain, that immediate pain from me. Now, creativity is premised on the idea of seeing the whole picture. So much of, work as a coach is helping someone get perspective. So again, if the narrative causes someone to go into a fear state, they go into survival, what they end up doing is becoming more judgmental about what's right, wrong, good, bad, and all of that sort of stuff.
Right.
It's not until we go into an elevated emotional state that we can access this thing called curiosity. And again, I think it's one of the most powerful tools we have in our arsenal, which is, yeah, I heard him say that, but I'm going to get curious here and see whether does it match my my own impression or interpretation of reality. Does it match what I'm seeing in my community? Does it match what I'm, hearing in conversations with other people? So, I look at the big picture and I put all of these pieces together. And that's the difference too, that idea of, respond to a situation versus react to a situation. If we're reacting, we're in survival, we're in a fear state. And, we're not going to be able to intuit. Like when we're in fear, like our intuition is out the window. We're just pain or pleasure, fight, flight, freeze, freak out, whatever. We need to get back into this place. And that's why I say it's so important to manage our emotional state before we go into this thing. So I don't want to step into even listening to a dialogue of someone talking on the screen unless I'm in the right state. Because I might sort of get triggered by something that someone says. I'm not in the right state. I do a lot of work on myself and I'm pretty good at holding space and being less reactive. But I might find I'm feeling a bit flat. So I need to just take a step back for a couple of days from the screen just to like let everything settle. Then I'll come back and re-engage with that conversation.
Right.
But again, it's this idea of taking ourselves out of fear and out of survival. That's not where we thrive. That's not where we come up with our creative genius solutions. Like that doesn't work. So whatever we can do to take ourselves out of that state and into these elevated states.
So good. Carl, you are helping me as we talk. I've just had a couple of moments as you've been talking where questions I've been posing to myself for quite some time, trying to solve problems within my business. I'm going, okay, now I know what I need to be doing. And so I've just really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I know our listeners are going to want to know more about what you do and how they can access what you've written. So where do we go if we want to learn more about Carl Massy?
Cool. I want to share one more story which sort of relates to what you were saying there. So working at this yoga center for 5 years, quite successful, but, a couple of things in the management, different values to myself. And I'm all about making sure you're aligned with your values. So I was uncertain, do I stay? Do I go? Do I stay invested? So what I do is I take myself up the east coast of Bali. I go to this place called Chandidasa. I go to my favorite bungalow on the side of the water. I remove all distraction. and I drop into, the core of my being, and I just want a
Mm.
yes or no answer. And
Mm.
when I'm in that state and I connect to, do I stay or do I go? It's a definitive go.
Mm.
I'm like, okay, that's answered. Next question, do I stay invested or do I sell my shares? Drop in, time to go. You don't like being a part of something that you're not influencing.
Mm. Mm.
So that's so much a part of the decision-making process. The bigger decisions is being able to put ourselves into, our genius zone, connected with life source, whatever your belief is, like in the zone, and make decisions from that place. Do not make important life decisions, when you're trying to sort of weave your way through your day. So I guess that's one of the last parting messages I would like
Yeah.
to pass on to your listeners.
I love it. So good, Carl. Really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. It's been great. Tell us about your book and how we
So,
can get a hold of it.
so Decision Making Mastery, it's available on Kindle and paperback, on Amazon. carlmassy.com is my website. Go in there, reach out and contact me. I'm pretty shit at the social media thing. Like, again, I've made the decision in my life where I want the lifestyle where I'm not necessarily regularly on social media,
Mm.
comparing myself to others, all that sort of hoo-ha. So I like deep conversations. I love working with people transitioning who are trying to decide that thing and they realize it's an important decision.
Mm.
I could try and figure it out myself, or I might just reach out, part with a few bucks, because that might be one of the best investments I make, because likely I'll see things that they don't see and I'm not
Yeah.
caught up in the weeds, the emotions, and that sort of stuff. So I'll get the perspective. So that's one of the things I love to do. So if anyone's in that position, I'm
Yeah.
more than happy to help out.
Definitely. So if you're in that position, go and check out Carl's book and also get in touch with him. We're going to put his contact details in the show notes in the description so you can get in touch with him. And I think you're going to see a few changes around the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Podcast, and you can thank Carl Massy for that one. So stay tuned as I announce those in the next little while. Carl, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Thanks very much for the listeners for tuning in, and thanks so much for the opportunity to share this with you. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you got a ton of value out of that episode. Don't forget to let us know what you thought in the comments, and if you have a topic you'd like us to cover next time, we'd love to hear from you. If you know anyone that would benefit from the content that we produce, please like and share this channel, and we look forward to having you next time on the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Channel.